From Unity Church of Christianity in Houston, Texas, this is The Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational Christian church providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress with the Reverend Howard Caesar.
So maybe you've heard about the husband and wife that were having an argument as to who was going to brew the coffee in the morning. You know, the wife said, well, you should do it because you get up first, and you wouldn't have to wait. Husband says, oh no, you're in charge of cooking, and that's your job. I know, that's what he said. Don't go. I'm just telling you. Don't attack me, all right? So he said, no, you're in charge of cooking, it's your job, and I can wait for the coffee till you get up. And well, the wife replies, well, no, you need to do it. And actually, it states in the Bible that you're supposed to do it. And so he says, I don't believe that. And so she went and got the Bible, opened it up to the New Testament, and a particular book she opened up to, and it said several pages right on the top, he brews. He brews. And for those of you who might not know, Hebrews is a book in the Bible. So we are in a series on relationships, and when we started out, we said that it would be a two-part series, but there's so much to cover that last week the two-part series became a three-part series, and then today we're in part 4 of the series, and actually this is the final part of this series, and it doesn't mean that that's the end of the various things that could be covered in relationships, because it's such a vast, broad topic, so huge, and it's so important. And as we have repeatedly said, all that life is relationships. And the quality of your relationships really takes you into a quality of life. The quality of your life hinges on the quality of your relationships. Very, very important. And that we are all basically in the schoolhouse of relationships all the time. And we're here to get a master's degree in unconditional love and forgiveness. And that love includes the love of God. It includes being able to love and accept ourselves. And it includes, out of that, being able to all the more love and accept all others, wherever they may be in their unfoldment, however they have progressed along or not. We are all interconnected. We really are all one family. So anywhere you go, whoever you meet, there's a relationship going on there, and there's an opportunity. We said that a relationship is a creation. The moment I meet you, even as a stranger, I'm creating with you that moment. Long-standing relationships, creation, always can be created better. And we said also that they are for learning, or for learning about ourselves. We find out more about ourselves in how we show up in relationships and what we feel being felt in relationships, okay? And we also said that relationships are for healing, and particularly they're for healing our past, the things that we have kind of lugged along as baggage that we want to let go of. And so love is meant to flow through us. You understand? We as spiritual beings, love is meant to flow through us because that's who we are. Love is who we are. And that's our creator. Our true nature is love because the source of all creation is love itself. And so it's important to know that. And so you can see that there are all kinds of references to love throughout the scriptures, and certainly where Jesus said the great law is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and your neighbor as yourself. And there are others that are wonderful, sprinkled throughout, but some of my favorites are, in 1 Corinthians, the one where it says, love never fails. Never forget that. We touched upon that last week, actually. And also in 1 Corinthians, do everything in love. It's like just everything you do. You've met people like that. They're amazing. They're wonderful to be around. They do everything out of love. Colossians 3, where it says, put on love, which binds all together in perfect unity. In other words, you put on love and you help bind and bond your family together, your workplace. It is a unifying energy, this activity of love. 1 Peter, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins. 1 John, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. So in that, we get to see that you want to know God, then the path to that is to just keep opening up more and more and more to love. Because the love is not yours, it's God's, all right? And so the more that you are loving, the more you feel a connectedness to the divine, the more you come to know God, the more that you come to know yourself, because through that, you are discovering the truth of who you are. Very, very powerful. So we feel happy, fulfilled, and kind of at home spiritually when we have this love moving through us. It's natural, it's what's supposed to happen. But when we don't have it flowing through us, especially for extended periods of time, then we are basically in some form of suffering. And when we are in fear, or when we're in sadness, or when we're in anger, or resentment, or conflict, or loneliness, or any emotion that essentially does not feel good, it can always basically be tracked back to a relationship. Anytime you're not feeling good inside, you're either not feeling good about your relationship with yourself, God, others around. There's stuff you're lugging around that does not allow you right now to be in a pure, powerful, and mighty and true relationship in your life. So that's where, again, relationships are for healing and relationships are for learning. Because when you have these other things going on, if you could track it back to a relationship and what needs to be mended there. So love is very important, and we have this part of our mind that we call the ego. It lies to us. It is always telling us things like, that love is found outside of us, and its motto is seek and do not find. It'll send you everywhere looking for it where it's not to be found. And it also, tells us, it's that little voice inside that says we don't get to be loved for who we are. So we have to become something different. And then we lose our authenticity at times. And it says we're not worthy of love. And all of these things. And whether it's a blatant thought or it's kind of hiding in the rocks in your mind, we have that. And many a person has that element going on. So we have this part of our mind that we call the ego, but it's also referred to sometimes as the separate self. It's what we have created, not God. And we can tend to be afraid to face that separate self. And we basically don't want to face or see things about ourselves that aren't the most wonderful. We don't want to see our jealousies. We don't want to see our selfishness. We don't want to see our resentments. We don't want to see our arrogance or our fears. And however, love and the nature of love is that it wants to heal you, all right? It wants to heal you. And so oftentimes, love acts as a force that focuses its light on the deep and shadowy parts of ourselves. And basically, it brings up to the surface parts of ourselves that we try to keep hidden. And so a rule is that love brings up anything unlike itself. You understand? And so love is trying to heal you. And as you let people get closer and closer to you, sometimes there's buttons and issues and charges. And it's basically love wanting to get expressed, and it's wanting to heal everything in its way. And so love will bring up everything unlike itself. We shouldn't run or retreat, but know there's a process that is going on here. All feelings fully felt will lead to the feeling of love, all right? So that's very important. So love relationships have their wonderful aspect to them. That it's not always hard work and, charges and issues and stuff. Relationships have wonderful aspects to them. And they also have times when we need to notice our charges and our issues, and we have to own them. And we have to not move into blame for feeling the way we feel. We have to feel our way through them. And we have to release the inner thought, the idea, the belief that we hold that is limiting about ourselves, really, that got triggered. And, Khalil Gibran, a wonderful writer, many of you have read his writings in the book, The Prophet. He has some wonderful, profound way of addressing some of what we're talking about right here. Just listen to what he writes. He says, when love beckons to you, follow him, though his ways are hard and steep. And when his wings unfold you, yield to him, though the sword hidden among his pinions may wound you. And when he speaks to you, believe in him. Though his voice may shatter your dreams as the north wind lays waste the garden. For even as love crowns you, so shall he crucify you. And even as he is for your growth, so he is for your pruning. Even as he ascends to your height and caresses your tenderest branches that quiver in the sun, so shall he descend to your roots and shake them in their clinging to the earth. There's a lot in there. We could go on for a long time, but for now what I'd like you to get is the point that where he says, love crowns you with joy. It really does, okay? And it can crucify you in pain. And that is because it is also growth that is going on. Love is bringing up all that needs to be released, unlike itself. And so we are to be growing into more loving ways, certainly, and it is also for your pruning. In other words, it's to bring things up to look at what it is that we need to cut away, that we need to let go, that we need to release, that is obstructing the flow of love that God has meant you to be a free channel of. And so it's letting go of critical perceptions and old grudges and resentments and unforgiveness and those things that we can often carry as a result of our separate self arguing and justifying for those things. And so forgiveness is something that is very important and we haven't talked about in this series. And that brings us to really a focus on the power of forgiveness, how important it is, how imperative, how essential and crucial it is that you exercise the muscle of forgiveness in your life, because it's there all the time in relationships, that opportunity. John Gottman is a gentleman, he's considered a relationship expert, and he is located up in the Seattle area, I believe, and he says that he can sit down with any couple for 10 minutes and tell you if the relationship will survive. And he is said to have a 96% accuracy. Now, he says that there are what he calls the four horsemen. And the four horsemen, there are four things that are basically important to overcome in a troubled relationship, or in any relationship for that matter. And he says those four horsemen are defensiveness, stonewalling or silent treatment, contempt. Contempt is a real strong energy, hard to push through. Criticism. Those are the four, okay? And those four things, those four horsemen can stampede a relationship and pound it into the ground. And so we can expound on all four horsemen and each one of those and talk more about them. But again, for the sake of time, what I want you to do is notice that all four have to do with forgiveness. In other words, every one of those things call for forgiveness, that they can fall away, melt away where there is a forgiveness going on. John says that in all that he has learned, in all of his years of counseling individuals, and it's been a lot of years, and counseling people, he boils it down to one concept, which is what he calls turning toward your partner or the other person rather than turning away. It all boils down to that. Turning toward, not away. And turning toward has to do with, obviously, love and forgiveness, unconditional. Instead of away from, blaming, justifying, punishing, resenting, all of that. Now, one of the important places important relationships we have is our relationship with ourselves, certainly, but our relationship is very, very important and powerful that we have had with our parents. It is known that an unhealed relationship with one parent or both parents will affect all other relationships, okay? It's just a known. And so forgiveness is the big healer, always. Unforgiveness can bring on the experience of all kinds of complications in a person's life. It can bring on experience of lack. It can block or get in the way of a person's career path. It can affect their finances, all kinds of things, because basically unforgiveness is stymieing an energy, a creative energy, and a light that wants to move through you. And life reflects what's going on internally. And so complications can come up for a person who hasn't done the forgiveness work that is called for. And they're carrying all these blocks in the way. There was a guy who was attending a seminar I was at and part of, and we were addressing the importance of the forgiving of your parents. And this one person had not spoken to his mother for 15 years, and they had some falling out. And so having heard the importance and the significance and having thought through the cost and the fact gotten to the place where, we all have stuff and there was really love underneath whatever happened, this person just got it. And at the break went and called his mother. And she immediately began to cry as soon as she heard his voice. And he told her he was sorry and that he was sorry for having distanced them all these years and had lost whatever, and they talked and they healed the relationship. And this guy it meant such a huge difference. He felt so light, so free. Something had lifted that he had been carrying. Because believe you me, you have an important relationship that you have broken and severed and in not a healthy way, that hasn't been repaired or cleaned up in any way. That's with you, And if you're like me, it can be a small little thing. It just keeps coming up. Like, when are you gonna repair this? When are you gonna fix this? When are you gonna own this? It's like that. It just does. And then finally you deal with it, And the quicker the better, obviously. Jesus said that we are to forgive 70 times 7. That means there isn't any time you're not supposed to. It's always. That's what 70 times 7 is really saying. And when Jesus was on the cross, that he was still demonstrating and teaching forgiveness. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. That's what we need to get to say. There's so many people that may do things, say things, and we just have to see that they're coming from some of their woundedness, and it got triggered. And we just need to love them through it. Forgive them. They know not what they do. They are not in touch with their wounds. They haven't heard the importance of this. And so, as we've already said, we're all basically a product of our past. And our woundedness, our confusion, our spiritual immaturity, our pain. And we have to realize that we all are suffering. All of us are suffering to some degree. We're on some level. And we have moments where we may have an issue or a flare-up or a charge, an unhealed issue. And so we simply need to own it and see our way through it. There's a wonderful quote from the mystic Christ, and it's a book. And let me read it to you. It's wonderful the way it speaks to this. He says, if we can begin to glimpse the tangled tapestry of torture that simmers deep within our own psyches, then we will be able to be more gracious in forgiving others. It requires great courage to accept responsibility for our own mental sufferings, such as anger, hatred, jealousy, fear. Yet, unless we do exactly that, we are doomed to suffer again and again, living in a hellish world of our own creation. It is not other persons, places, and things that are to blame. God is not to blame. It is the condition of our own minds that is to blame. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, Paul said. So the goal is to free the mind, of its stories, of its justifications, of its grudges that we hold in place and build a case in our mind. We punish others. We think we're punishing others, justifying unforgiveness. And so we are really not ever up against another person when it comes to forgiving. We are basically up against our minds, our egos, our separate self, and how loud that voice has been and how dominant it perhaps has been in us. There's a story about a teacher who wanted to teach her students a spiritual lesson on this idea of forgiveness, and they were grade schoolers, and so as an assignment she had them all think of people that they needed to forgive, even as youth, and to go home and get a potato for each person or group or whatever in the world that they needed to forgive. and to bring it back in a heavy, strong bag. And so they did that, and they all brought them back the next day. And then she said, okay, the assignment now is to take your bag of potatoes and take it home and place it in a closet or somewhere away, and like she set a date, 7 or 10 days down the road, to bring them back. And they all brought them back, and they were all rotten, and they all smelled. And her point was that this is much like what holding on to a hurt, a wound, an issue does within us. It's not good. There's that saying that when we refuse to forgive, it's like us taking poison and expecting it to hurt the other person, you know? So the mystic would say, well, we must forgive others because they are us. It understands that we're all one. And so the anger, the hatred, and the holding the grudge, it blocks the grace of God. The Course in Miracles, some of you read, and it's a wonderful, wonderful reference to the movement of the Spirit through Jesus. And it carries the teachings and establishes within the framework of the Course in Miracles the very, very important importance of forgiveness. And it teaches that we have perceptual errors that occur as a result of our filters from the past. And as we learn to recognize our errors in perception, we begin to look past them, and which is actually to forgive, looking past errors in perception. So we're to learn to forgive not because we're trying to be good, but because we're basically looking past distorted concepts to the self that God created. So rather than looking from the self that we created, that's separate and apart, that judges and criticizes and all this stuff, we're looking past that and taking a stand in the identity of the self that God created us to be, where love flows freely. In the text, it talks about forgiving eyes. It says this: the grace of God rests gently on forgiving eyes, and everything they look on speaks of him to the beholder. He can see no evil, nothing in the world to fear, and no one who is different from himself. And as he loves them, so he looks upon himself with love and gentleness. He would no more condemn himself for his mistakes than damn another. He is not an arbiter of vengeance, nor a punisher of sin. The kindness of his sight rests on himself with all the tenderness it offers others, for he would only heal and only bless. And being in accord with what God wills, he has the power to heal and bless all those he looks on with the grace of God upon his sight. Wow. Just looking at someone can be powerful and healing and a blessing. In India, as you know, I've gone numerous times to Oneness University. They emphasize certainly forgiveness. They teach that forgetting is not forgiving. And they say, of course, that forgiveness is basically experiencing the pain that the other person has given to you. To experience it, no judging, no explanation, no analyzing, just experiencing it, all feelings fully felt, you see. And they stress the internal freedom and joy that can be experienced once you've gone through that process. And so it's not easy, but they also say jump into the mouth of the tiger, which is to feel the feelings you don't want to feel. But by feeling them, you're set free. And they say that the process is not that you experience the pain and feel your way through it and then forgive the other. They say experiencing the pain is the forgiveness. It breaks it up. And so all feelings fully felt lead to the feelings of love. It breaks it up, and now you see more clearly, you feel free to go ahead and love where it stood in the way, out of the feeling of it. And they talk about two parts to forgiveness. One is to forgive others that have made perhaps you feel hurt in various things, but the other is to ask forgiveness of another. And sometimes we don't want to do that. Our ego doesn't really want to do that. And also we are sometimes afraid, and the person may not be approachable. So you can basically just bring them before you in a kind of a meditative state and bless them. What they say is experience the pain that you created in another, that you know you have created in another. And by experiencing that, you break it up, actually, the dynamic of what's going on between you, because we're all connected. and that they have evidence of people who have done that, and all of a sudden that person calls them. In other words, they went through a process, they felt the feelings of the pain that they put themselves in their shoes, what they did to them, and felt it through, and it dispersed something that allowed that person then to think of them and call them and begin a repaired relationship. It's very powerful. So, resentments, regrets, neither are part of a healthy relationship. Resentment, the payoff for resentment is just to feel justified and sometimes self-righteous. A regret, they say, makes yourself wrong, and that way no one else has to make you wrong. And it can be almost a protection. But again, it's just getting back to the cost. If we can look at the cost of resentments, regrets, and all of these things, the grudges, the judgments, the cost is in not loving. It's not allowing love to flow through us. That's what makes us happy. Love and happiness go together, really. And the cost is closeness. The cost is intimacy. The cost is being closed off to other people. The cost is happiness, as we said, well-being. So one of the big things that I suggest you all do is go home today and call forth to memory your parents. And maybe they have passed on. And if you had any problem with any of them, just look at what needs to be repaired, and just feel the feelings and just genuinely, authentically pour your heart out to them and let them know how much you love them. And even if you had no problem with your parents and they've moved on, it is a tremendous blessing to those who are even on the other side, in the next room in God's house, great house of life, because we are all connected. It's very, very powerful and freeing to do that. Ask God to help you review that in your life that needs to be dealt with in regards to freedom and into forgiveness, so that you might be free. Holy relationships are healthy relationships, and healthy relationships are holy relationships, and they are where everybody wins. There are no losers. It's where both parties come from a wholeness, and they discover the truth of who they are, and they're willing to be that. And holy, healthy relationships are where there are no demands or dependency placed on another. Their relationships with God help them know their God self and speak from the God self as opposed to the separate self. And they begin to stop looking outside themselves. So we have all learned to look to God inside of ourselves. That's what it's about. This concludes this series on this, and truly, may you all be set free. May you realize that there is a freedom waiting for you, that love is who you really are. And I close with this from 1 John. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in him. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. At Unity, we believe that God's presence of love and goodness is everywhere, and that life is meant to be good. You can find out more about Unity and our teachings at unityhouston.org.